Hello everyone. So this is going to be a little bit of a prologue to the upcoming podcast with Richard and Clay regarding the PlayStation Showcase that happened very recently. And the reason I wanted to do this prologue is that over the last few days, I've been jotting down some notes for the podcast, and it's ballooned into a lot of notes, especially during the introduction to the podcast, before we even start getting into the games themselves. And I wanted to make this little video to discuss a specific aspect about the PlayStation Showcase that I feel like, while I do want to talk about it, which is why you're getting it, it's getting its own separated video, I don't want it in the introduction for two reasons. One, I don't want to drone on and on and on during the introduction for like 15 to 20 minutes and then just completely overshadow Richard and Clay. That's not what I want to do. So that's why it's part of why this is getting its own video. And two, while I do think it is an important subject, I mainly want to focus on the individual games in the podcast about the showcase. I will definitely give my overall thoughts on the showcase, but I don't want to dedicate as much time as I currently would if I went with all the notes that I currently have. So you're getting a little prologue to the podcast. And the subject that I wanted to touch on for this prologue is I wanted to revisit Sony's live service initiative, which to me this represents the next era of PlayStation. And I just want to say too that from what I've seen so far from PlayStation's live service initiative, with stuff that was at the showcase, coupled with news that has come to light today, actually, at the time of recording this, I am far from impressed so far. If this was Sony's first step towards getting people on board with their new live service initiative, then I think they failed spectacularly. Between how uninspired the two first-party live services looked, to Naughty Dog's Factions 2 seemingly being in development hell and maybe even canceled, this new live service obsession that Sony has is already off on the wrong foot. It's already extremely worrying. It was worrying before this, and now it's even more so. And regarding the Factions 2 news, if you haven't heard yet, there was an article published by Bloomberg today that talked about how they have sources that have basically told them that Factions 2 is not doing well. In fact, during one of PlayStation's recent assessments of all the different teams that they're working with for exclusive games, they brought in Bungie, who they recently acquired, to head up this live service initiative of excellence or some shit like that, to go and kind of provide their own feedback on the live services that Sony have in production. And the story is that Bungie took a look at Factions 2 and for whatever reason thought that the game did not have enough content or was not up to snuff as far as sustaining a long-term experience. And because of this, apparently Naughty Dog is now reassessing the quality of the project and scaling down. And not only that, they, according to the article as well, they have removed most of the staff from Factions 2, and only a small group of people are continuing to work on it. Which, this was the big one. I think there are two big marquee live services that PlayStation had in the works. It's this and that Horizon multiplayer game. And to see already that one of the two big live services that they were working on is in this much trouble, that's very concerning. And regarding Factions 2 specifically, I'm split in multiple directions. On one hand, I'm annoyed that Naughty Dog has wasted more than 5 years on a multiplayer project that we now probably won't get to see for a very long time, or at all. So that's just time that was totally wasted and thrown into the toilet when they could have been working on another single player game that was maybe within the scope of a Lost Legacy or something like that. On the other hand, and this is where I'm gonna play devil's advocate, it's somewhat encouraging to see PlayStation doing some kind of quality control on these live services so they don't come out and are garbage. That's the impression that I somewhat get with this. And it's the same thing because there was also the news that Deviation Games, one of the teams they were working on for another live service, Sony apparently did not like what was going on with that game. And from what I understand, most of the staff has been laid off and the game is more than likely canceled. So Sony is not willing to just let any old live service release. They want it to have some kind of quality standard, which I can respect in theory, but on yet another hand, I have to call Bungie standards into question, considering some of the really shady and annoying live service shit they've pulled with Destiny 2. Especially the sunsetting of content and bumping up the price of the season passes or whatever you call them. Just Bungie, I've always been dubious about Bungie being brought in as this judge of all the live services that PlayStation has in the works, but we will never see what Faction 2 was going to be. So we have to kind of take Bungie on their word that they know what they're doing when it comes to evaluating these live services. But the problem is, I don't really trust Bungie when it comes to evaluating stuff as far as monetization and long-term engagement. I trust them when it comes to creating a compelling gameplay experience, because I think Destiny 2 has amazing shooting. But anything else? Not really, no. But if I'm being brutally honest, at this point, I really don't care if Naughty Dog cancels Factions 2 and pivots back to working on a single player game like The Last of Us Part 3 or a new IP. Shit, I would gladly take The Last of Us Part 3 over some live service right now. I really would. I don't want them to make The Last of Us Part 3, but if we get a Last of Us Part 3 over a live service, fuck, I'll take it. Shit. I gladly will take that. And the ironic thing is, if Bungie looks at more of these live services and says, nope, this ain't it, and they continually get delayed or canned, then the funniest thing is that acquisition was great to be as a single player guy, because Bungie is going in and telling PlayStation, no, with some of these live services. So we're gonna get less of them, which makes me happy. Sorry, that's the truth. I know that makes me sound like a dick, but it's true. The more of these live services that either get delayed into oblivion or canned, that makes me happier. Because one thing I've always said is that I think the live service model already has its winners. It's had its winners for years now, and they've built very sizable followings. Even big publishers like Epic themselves, the makers of Fortnite, Ubisoft, EA, have all had big failures in this market because they couldn't get people to leave the games that they already play, like Fortnite, like Apex Legends, like Genshin Impact, Call of Duty, the annual sports games, and even Bungie's own Destiny 2. I've said it once, and I'll say it again, unless you have something truly unique and fresh, I think it's incredibly foolish to make a live service these days. And PlayStation in particular missed this boat by many years. And now it stinks of desperation seeing them throw a bunch of shit at the wall in the hope that maybe one or two of them would stick. As a lifelong PlayStation fan, it's very disheartening to hear that they now want 60% of their output to be live services at some point in the future, because I think that's a huge mistake, and I very highly doubt it will pan out well for them. I can foresee maybe something like the Horizon multiplayer game being a hit for them, just because that's a cool concept. And I think Helldivers 2 might be a decent success. But that's really about it, honestly, as far as the stuff that I'm aware exists. And just PlayStation really did nothing to assuage my fears with this showcase. And in fact, I'm more nervous about their future output than ever, especially with a company like Bungie having a ton of influence in the building. And what makes me sad too is that it's almost like PlayStation misunderstood what people meant when they said we want more variety from PlayStation games. And I'll be honest, I was one of those people that after some point I said, I'm gonna need something different from you guys, aside from the third person, very narrative heavy kind of stuff. I mean, I like that stuff from PlayStation, but after a whole generation and change of it, I would like something different. And by different, I did not mean live services. I did not mean Concord or fair games. I meant variety in my single player games, more survival horror games, more goofy, silly platformers, other genres that are unique to PlayStation that they don't do. That's what we want with variety. Not this. Not fair games with its watchdog ass looking characters that it's just a PvP heist shooter. The last thing I'll say before I end this video is that I warned people at the beginning of the PS5 generation that we hadn't yet seen the games that Jimmy Boy Ryan and Herman Holtz were willing to greenlight. But now we're starting to see them. Now we're starting to see the fruits that are growing on the new live service trees in Sony's garden. And it does not look very promising from what I have seen so far. And if PlayStation wanted to get me on board with this, with the games that they showed off at the showcase that they've announced so far, I am not there. No. I'm not there as far as having faith in PlayStation. And if these live services are going to be anything like fucking fair games, yeah, ugh, God.